Welcome back to the SLM podcast in collaboration with the Resilience Connection. Now, today I am chatting with Donnie Macfadyen. Uh, Donnie is a dad, partner, a strength coach, an athlete, retired international rugby player, having played for 9 seasons with Glasgow Warriors, retired in 2008 with 11 caps for Scotland and 132 games for Glasgow. Yeah, it's a bruising career. So in this in our kind of pre-chats we've had, Donny's reflected back on his rugby career and has often seen it defined in his mind as one dominated by injury and untapped potential. When he retired for rugby in 2008, he brought a wholly unprepared, found himself wholly unprepared for the journey into and through retirement at the age of 28. Marriage, divorce, financial struggle, mental illness, and grief. With stops on oil rigs, rehab for drug and alcohol addiction, coffee shops, close protection training, and gyms. Donnie now lives down in Cornwall with his partner and her 2 cats. Donnie works as a strength coach and is drawn to delivering that service with compassion and authenticity, which I love. He's passionate about coaching, strength training, leadership, and building compassion for himself and others through self-awareness, self-reflection, and action, and aspiring to lead a values-driven life built on nurturing genuine connection with the people in his life. Donnie, welcome, mate.
Thank you for having me, Simon.
Reading that just, makes me smile, actually.
Yes.
That's that's really that's what a lovely way to live your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a journey kind of getting there, if you like. So I'm sure we'll
Yeah.
probably cover at some stage. But yeah, no, I'm incredibly grateful for where I am right now, and I'm looking back as a part of helping myself look forward. Um, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's we it's not good to linger in the past all the time, but
No.
definitely there's a time and a place for reflection. Um
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think I'm at the moment going through some work with a therapist. Now I've worked with therapists and so fantastic ones, but as so often seems to be the case, it kind of you're ready when you're ready. Um, and
yes.
these last 6 months, I was ready. And sometimes I speak to people and they're like, "Oh, you need to stop thinking about that happened in the past and think forward." And I'm a bit like, having the confidence to go, no, I need this, and trying to kind
Yeah.
of come up with an analogy that makes sense to me. It's almost like a circuit board. Like I've been wired a certain way, which has helped me and hindered me. And I just reached a point in my life where I was like, what I need to do is basically unwire it all so that I can then rewire it. Is what makes sense to me, and that unwiring involves looking back. Um,
Yeah.
and it's the appropriate time to do that.
Well, having the fact that you've had the awareness that you are ready, so many
Mm,
people don't. Some people just don't even pick up on that they are ready to do something with it.
yeah, it's funny because like I've been retired from over 16 years, um, and there's been multiple times in that journey where I've gone, I've got this sorted now, and then something else would happen. You go, all right, okay, maybe not, and like I do reflect a lot. Like that's a big part of my personality, and also, I mean, I consciously do it.
Yeah.
Sometimes too much. I would definitely acknowledge that. Um, but yeah, no, it felt right, like the right time to do it. It's funny how sometimes the universe does converge. You've got to take action in that universe, but it does. I do kind of believe that. And it was actually quite an amusing conversation I had with a lady who was training at the gym I was working at, and I can't remember the context of why I said this. But I basically said to her, she was in the middle of doing an exercise, which is bad coaching. But I spoke to her while she was doing it. I think I said something along the lines of, "If I spoke to you the way that I speak to myself, you wouldn't be a member here. And she just stopped what she was doing and she looked at me and she was like, do you know that I'm a psychologist? And I was like, no, I didn't know that. We had a bit of a laugh about it, but she kind of genuinely, she was like, listen, I think maybe, have you ever considered maybe examining that? And I think what was really interesting because, like, I'm sure loads of people do this. They look at their own experience and they think perhaps some of the stuff that goes on is normal and everyone else is thinking and feeling the same way.
Yeah.
And it just took that random one conversation for me to go, maybe this like isn't normal that I have a thought process like that. Like maybe this is something that has a beginning and all this sort of stuff. Maybe it would be helpful, yeah, just to find someone to work with on that and kind of, as I say, like unwire it, examine it, and
Yeah.
then let's see if we can rewire it.
Well, there are many ways to do these things. And just as you've been finding out, there's no one way to
Yeah,
for everyone to follow.
yeah,
We have to, as I described earlier, fuck around and find out. We have
yeah,
to test and adjust.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And as I said, like 16 years of of not feeling quite right. Probably longer than that actually, but like really kind of acutely 16 years. And as I said, like I've tried all sorts of solutions. And yeah, all sorts of solutions. And some of them have worked, some of them haven't worked at all, some of them worked for a little bit of time. And I I generally don't know. I hope that what I'm doing right now, the work that I'm doing right now will be a big shift and a lasting one. But I also go, do you know what? Like my experience shows me that this is going to be probably be a continual process.
I'm inclined to agree for everyone. We're always a constant work in progress, really,
Yeah.
aren't we? There's always something to work on.
Yes. Yeah.
New and old.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So in thinking about that phrase you've used, our internal wiring
Mm,
and kind of looking at the source of it in terms of resilience for you, what role, in your life, I guess from early on as an athlete getting into rugby,
hmm
you know, rugby, you have to be not only physically resilient, but you have to be mentally strong to play the game, you know,
hmm
to stick with it and keep going and get to the
Yeah.
level you got at. But starting out, kind of, well, the early moments within your, can you recognize pinpoint anything when you're first starting rugby as to, wow, this is, I'm I can do, that moment when I can do this, I've got it.
Mm, yeah. Um, I don't know if it was like maybe not necessarily a moment on the pitch, but I mean
Yeah.
my kind of story with that one would be the the really interesting kind of, I don't know if this is the right way of putting it, but a kind of social shift that happened for me because I was like quite overweight child, very shy, very withdrawn, didn't have a huge amount of friends, and but underneath it, I'd always been quite a good athlete, and
Okay.
and what the kind of narrative was that like I got bullied at school about my weight. Like in a way, like so often say this, like in a way, it wasn't that bad because it was all just verbal stuff. But
Okay.
in the like that's my has been my kind of thinking about that for my whole life. Oh, it's just words. But then now the more I kind of understand, I'm a bit like actually that can be incredibly upsetting, and that's okay that it's upsetting. That's not weakness to be upset by that. So as a result, and I suppose it's perhaps a kind of a first indication of resilience, if you like, because I remember being incredibly upset about that and then deciding to do something about it at the age of, I don't know, 11. So I would get up before school and go for runs, started lifting weights, like started paying attention to what I was eating and lost the weight. And as I said earlier on, like I'd always been a good athlete, but like an overweight one. And then all of a sudden, like started achieving some some good things athletically, like rugby pitch and in athletics itself. And like I reflect back, and I found it quite odd because there was this complete shift in my social status off the back of that kind of
Okay.
sporting success, that you go from being kind of in the background and no one really paying attention to all of a sudden being like seen and celebrated for what you were doing, which I always found really, really interesting, because I suppose underneath it all, I'm still the same person. Um, so I
Yeah.
think that's probably the kind of first memory of it. I'm not sure if that actually answers your question, but that's what I thought of.
No, I think it does, because that was a moment where you had to dig deep, didn't you?
Mm,
And do change the way you were doing things
yeah,
in quite a few, training, eating,
yeah,
the way you were just doing things in your life, changing
yeah,
your whole routine in a short space. That's a lot of change in one go. That I think, to make that decision at that age and to have the resilience, mentally to stick with it, to push
yeah,
yourself to achieve those results. Yeah, that's quite doesn't seem like at that at the time you never really think about it as such in that way.
no, yeah,
Now looking back, you think, bloody hell, that was
exactly, yeah. The kind of the looking back things, I think, is fascinating as well. I know it's a conversation that we've had previously about this, about our own self perception of our own resilience,
yes,
and how we diminish it, and how we look at other people and go, "Wow, that's amazing." But then when it comes to stuff that we've overcome, you just the narrative seems to be, well, maybe this is just, well, maybe not just me, but maybe this is not everyone thinking this way. But certainly the way I think about it is, you kind of you downplay it, or you kind of shit all over it a little bit, and it's being like it wasn't anything special, and it takes people
yeah,
outside you saying, "Listen, wow, like that was incredibly, that was inspirational, the way you managed to kind of pick yourself up and kind of keep going." But somewhere inside your head, there's still that kind of voice that's like, it's not good enough, or you were scared, or yeah, it's a topic that I find really, really interesting.
yeah. I think it's a good point, and I think there's a lot of that it's down to British culture.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, we have very self-deprecating. You don't want to be big-headed, seen to be big-headed and blowing your own trumpet too much, because people just, you cocky, arrogant wanker, really, is the
Yeah.
expressions that get thrown around quite a lot with people
Yeah.
seemed
It
perceived to be doing that.
yeah. Uh, like we were chatting about this, just before we came on, like the that's um and it's quite a Scottish thing as well. Like you're saying British, but like that kind of stiff British upper lip, like that, uh, fantastic sometimes, sometimes
Yeah.
disastrous would be my
Yes.
perception of it. Like depending on the scenario, like just keep calm and carry on, awesome. But other times, like that kind of emotional, what's the word, kind of slight, kind of emotional, kind of stunted stuff, I think is can be
Yeah.
incredibly counterproductive.
Massively so. I look at crikey. I think even from you look at the First World War, Second World War, um, the stuff that Britain's been involved in with the
Mm,
military since this in the last century, and
yeah,
up until I think the Falklands, only after the Falklands that we really started to take it seriously and start looking into it, as to what people are actually
yeah,
really able to tolerate and for how long.
hmm, yeah,
But people do that in their day-to-day lives, don't they? They normalize and
yeah.
accept and go, well, this is it.
This is just it.
Put
Yeah,
up with so much crap for a long, long time, and then wonder why they're a mess.
yeah. And it's, I mean, like obviously we're talking about resilience here, and it's been like, I don't know the answer to this, but there is like, there must be a time when resilience is a good thing, and then at other times where you may be telling yourself that you're being resilient, when in actual fact you're just staying in a situation which is bad because you don't want to give up. Um, and yeah, maybe getting confused about that a little bit.
Yeah, there's a misconception about about resilience and what and part of resilience is knowing what your limits are,
Mhm.
working to them, accepting that sometimes you're going to work beyond them, but
Mhm.
not,
All the time.
yeah, and indefinitely.
Yeah.
And knowing when to say no. No, actually, no, I can't do that anymore, or I'm not going to
Yeah.
do any more of that, or I'm not going to do that at all. That's
Yeah.
way beyond what I want to do,
Mhm.
or what
Yeah.
I'm capable of. Being honest with yourself and other people about that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
that resilience is definitely a big part of it. Is understanding what your limits are, and
Mhm.
and being honest, being true to yourself, valuing yourself rather than just plowing on. I've
Yeah.
been down that route and creamed in face first.
Yes.
It's not
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been down that route as well, and it's something I sometimes chat to people about in the coaching I do. Just being like, this is my own experience, but also I see it in other people. Is the amount of times you need to like barrel ahead with something that you are convinced is the answer for it all to go completely pear shaped. You got to do that like quite a few times before you eventually go, maybe this was maybe there's another way.
Yeah,
And I recognize that in myself for a really long time. Probably only just now, really looking at stuff and going like these like inbuilt belief system that I've got about things. Like, does it are they serving me as well as I thought they maybe were?
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Because what was useful isn't necessarily now.
Yeah, and you kind of ask about my rugby career, and I think that's really interesting. It's something I've been giving a lot of thought to recently because when I speak to people about my rugby career as well as like my experiences after playing, and being like almost like wanting to be grateful for the challenges I've had because they've made me who I am today,
Yep.
which is sort of right. But the kind of it was a question somebody asked me recently. Um, like so I as so many people do like really wrestle with perfectionism, imposter syndrome, like kind of really negative internal voice like this. These are all things that I have kind of going on, and for such a long time it's so kind of insidious because it was almost like that negative voice in my brain convinced me that it was the thing that was making me successful,
Yeah.
because I wouldn't quit and I all this sort of stuff. And it had been like just looking at it for the first time, as I said, somebody asked me the question like, imagine if you had a bit of a different framework to work with and you weren't a perfectionist and you were able to show yourself a little bit more compassion. Like I got to the level I got to in sports, despite the fact that I was trying to manage like a pretty crippling fear of failure throughout my whole career. And I was a bit like, wow, like imagine if I'd had a bit more of a nurturing inner dialogue, like what could I have done?
Yeah.
Um, because for such a long time, I looked at it as like that was kind of that was the thing that made me successful because that was the thing that made me driven. But then going, well, actually, maybe you would have always been driven, but you would have, yeah, you would have been able to relax and just perform, be able to, yeah, just manage that fear of failure, which is pretty kind of crippling.
Yeah. Yeah. It's when it's not managed, if it's left to kind of fester,
Mm, yeah,
and just do its own thing, it's quite, yeah, as you said, it's insidious, isn't it?
yeah. It's like reflecting back on my kind of playing career and like it's one of my memories of being like I'm fascinated by like when it comes to teams like the kind of concept of like creating like psychological safety for people, and how what a massive impact that can have on performance, and I look back now as well in my own career like that wasn't really present really in the environments that I was in.
Okay.
People were doing their best. I have no doubt about that. But it was maybe just the thinking at the time just wasn't as evolved. Um, but then how I think about it now is that process of kind of self-reflection and the kind of rewiring that I was talking about earlier on and being like if I can figure out a way to give myself like like safety, like psychological safety, then that will make me more resilient because I could be in an environment which isn't psychologically safe, but I'm able to find it for myself. And then that will be the thing that allows me to be resilient and kind of capable and perform in perhaps difficult environments is kind of what I'm kind of playing around with a little bit at the moment.
Nice. I like that. Yeah. In so I always I'm of the school of thought that in order to be psychologically resilient, you need to be emotionally resilient.
Yep.
Um, how much emotional resilience did you find there was within when you were playing rugby
Um,
for yourself and for others? You know, kind of as a team.
yeah. Uh, well, I mean, I'll start with myself, and that's it, I think I've always had a level of emotional intelligence, but doing a bit of reading about what actually emotional intelligence is, and like I think I'm good at the kind of reading other people, being able to empathize with other people part. But the other part of it, from my understanding, is being able to recognize and manage your own emotions. And so I'm like, well, maybe I'm not as emotionally intelligent as I think I am, because for a very, very long time, it's something I'm having to work really hard on at the moment is allowing myself to feel real emotions. For instance, anger is a really difficult one for me. I find it incredibly difficult to express that. And I have tended to just swallow it down because for whatever reason, that's obviously not an emotion that I feel safe to express. Um, and and I definitely reflect back on my rugby career and go like, God, I wish I'd been able to create my own psychological safety, because then I would have been able to express emotion about the way that things were going, um, and made much more of an impact than I did. Um, yeah, is what I would say, because I I kind of I censored myself because I wanted to fit in, as opposed to having the emotional maturity to go, right, like this isn't right. Like like I have a voice. I should be able to use it. If this is annoying me, or I'm pissed off about this, I'm a human being. I should be able to express this. Um,
Yeah.
is what I kind of reflect back on. But I just wasn't at a stage there. I had the tools to be able to, yeah, I had the tools to be able to kind of manage that, I think.
It's I think it's a difficult one when you're younger, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely. It's certainly something that for most people comes with life experience.
Hmm.
You know, when you've been around the block a few times,
Yeah,
you know where you know in what context you can express yourself more freely than others,
yeah,
and when you need to kind of manage yourself better so that you know don't make an ass of it. Which you know,
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. I think like it's the question I sometimes get asked. I'm like, what would you tell your 21-year-old self if you could go back now? Like, it's an interesting thing to think about. My initial reaction is, I can guarantee you, it wouldn't matter what 45-year-old Donnie said, 21-year-old Donnie probably wouldn't have listened. But yeah, no, it's just that idea of, like, as you're saying, like that that maturity and that experience, and is one of those. I don't know if it's something that you think about, but like I have wrestled with it a little bit, the frustration and anger that I feel, that I'm like, God, like I feel like I'm just starting to reach a point of emotional maturity. And I was like, if only I could have put the head I have now on the body I had when I was 20. And I was like, you feel like a superhero.
oh my God, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. I'm glad it's not just me.
Oh no, if you know if I knew then what I knew now,
Yeah,
God, what a
yeah,
different life I would have had. Jesus
mm,
Christ. Yeah, that would
yeah,
be yeah, I think pretty much everyone has
yeah,
that moment of realization at some point. Jesus, if only. But
mm,
you know, I just you have to do that vicariously now through my kids. So
yeah. Oh God, yeah. I mean,
it's
I've got a an 18-year-old daughter. I couldn't agree more. And this isn't a criticism or a comment on how I was parented, but one thing I've noticed was it's so interesting. I parent in a way that I wish I'd been parented. As I said, like I don't mean that as a slander
Yeah.
against mom and dad. It's more just being like, these are the things that I maybe needed and maybe just didn't get for whatever reason, and being like, now I do it in excess with my daughter.
Yeah.
But I suppose that's just a natural way of doing things, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. We try and, well, we learn from, we've got to
Yeah,
learn from other people's mistakes as well as our
yeah,
own.
yeah. As well as taking the good stuff, right?
100%,
Mm.
that's, it is about, identifying what's worth taking on, what's worth leaving
Yeah,
behind.
yeah,
I had this conversation with a chap earlier today. We talked about that, what do we take from each, as we move to a different chapter in life, what do we take, well, we take everything that we've got and we move into the next chapter of life. It's only when we're in that chapter that we realize, oh shit, there's some things here that just don't fit. They don't work. They're
yeah,
not applicable. They're not appropriate.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. I
And
mean
it's
that.
hard to figure that out.
Yeah, and that's something I come across a lot in relation to like strength coaching. Like
Yep.
I recognized it first in myself, in that I was kind of mid 30s and I was still holding myself to the same standards I had when I was a professional athlete in my 20s, even though I'd been retired for 10 years. I was still using the same training philosophy, even though
Yeah.
I was 10 years older and my life looked very different. And it was a kind of process of like, right, wait a second, like great strategies at the time. Now, different like stage in my life, perhaps not applicable or helpful anymore. And I suppose it's a bit like as you say, like taking the baggage from one house and just taking it into another because you think you still need it.
Yeah. And it's a slow process figuring out what you need to leave behind,
Yeah, yeah,
what's worth hanging on to.
yeah,
And then some of the things are hard to let go of.
yes, yes, really, really difficult. Yeah, really, really difficult. Like a lot of my, a lot of my, a lot of my, one of the trickiest things that I found leaving rugby was I didn't really have a kind of concept of who I was. So my identity was very much wrapped up in I was Donnie Macfadyen, the professional rugby player. And that suddenly not being the case was like a real shock. I was completely unprepared for it, as I said as we said in the bio. Like, just that was one of the if I had to kind of pick one out, one of
Mm.
the really big kind of hurdles that I have tried and have continues to try to kind of make my way over. But the kind of letting go of old strategies thing, like um, it, one of the things that I wrestled with for a really, really long time was this pressure that I put onto myself. No, and that was probably the moment when I was able to let it go was when I kind of was a really good friend of me who just looked me in the eye one day and was like, Donnie, I really don't feel like you've got anything left to prove, and in the kind of athletic arena, if you like. And I was a bit like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, maybe I'm the only one maybe I'm the one who's trying to prove something to somebody, and that's me. Um,
Yeah.
uh, and the other kind of the way that ties in, we said earlier on about kind of letting go or like giving up and what that line is, and really powerful thing that happened to me recently was I got diagnosed with epilepsy, and when you have something like that happen in your life, which is a big shock, um, it can also sometimes be helpful because it forces you to stop and kind of like, what am I doing here? Um, and off the back of that, I realized that because, and it says it in the bio, because of the way I perceived my rugby career, and that it was dominated by injury, untapped potential, and then retire. And it was like what I realized. I think it's perhaps quite a common thing people do is I'd spent 16 years after I retired in my head trying to figure out a way I could go back and fix that situation.
Hmm.
Um, and then being like, good Lord, like, wow. Like, 'cause there was a kind of combination of the only person who charged the pre to is you, as well as the pressure I put myself under. Like it, it influenced how I lived my life, influenced the careers that I chose post rugby, because I was fairly desperately trying to find another identity, another place where I could like prove myself, another kind of like I really drawn towards kind of like I don't know if elite's the right word, but like not normal jobs, if you like, something special about it. Maybe a job
Yeah.
not everyone could do. And yeah, it was just really interesting that realization of being like, wow, like maybe it's okay to let go of that. And the letting go doesn't necessarily mean I'm just giving up completely, because that's the way I kind of phrased it in my head.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it was quite a powerful one. That like, oh, wow, like not every decision, but like a lot of these decisions, like for instance, I said that I worked in the oil rigs for a couple of years. Like I was desperately looking around for like I was looking for like male dominated environment, hard work, like really bonded, like physical, like quite kind of edgy, kind of that's what drew me to that job.
Yeah.
And it was yeah, it wasn't everything that I thought it was going to be. It wasn't necessarily that. I mean, it's a really interesting example of like maybe the uniqueness of like sports teams and perhaps, I mean, I don't know, but military units, that kind of, we have to be all in together here to make
Yeah.
this work. Whilst when I went offshore in the rigs, I was a bit like, all right, okay, like, yeah, it is like quite an intense environment. We do all have to work together, but ultimately everyone's here to endure their 3 weeks and then go home again and take the money. So
Yeah.
there wasn't that team spirit. Maybe there was different on other rigs, I'm not sure, but that wasn't my experience.
Yeah. It's in, I think because that industry is it's quite transient, isn't it? So there's a lot of people coming and going.
Yeah,
Um, Makes it more difficult to have that level of cohesiveness you have in
yeah,
a consistent team.
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, and it's more money oriented,
Yes. Yeah.
as you said.
Um,
Take the money and go home.
yeah. Yeah.
Which
Which,
fair enough,
yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a
Yeah,
criticism.
definitely.
It's just a
Yeah.
observation.
Yeah. I mean, like I got into it and I'm able to look back now and go, what was I really wanting? I mean, the money was great, but it was like what I wanted was I wanted to be part of a team again. I'd been on my own out of rugby for 3 or 4 years. I wanted to be part of a team again. I was looking for a brotherhood, and
Yeah,
just looked in the wrong place, which is okay. But yeah, no, it's once again it comes back to that kind of intention. What was I really looking for out of that? And then looking back and going, right, okay, great to try it, but probably wasn't everything you thought it was going to be.
so how do you think that kind of initially that loss of identity,
Mm,
then uncertainty about it while searching for it to kind of develop a new one.
mm-hmm.
How what impact did that have on your resilience, would you say?
I mean, to give a bit more of a kind of context and a picture of that particular period of time.
Mm,
So my understanding is that there is loads of people who are doing a better job of this now. But when I retired, there wasn't really any support structure in place.
yeah,
There wasn't really any kind of retirement planning. There was nothing like that. And it, from what I gather, loads better now, which is brilliant. Um, but the kind of the context of my retirement, it was I told this story to a friend recently, and it's really interesting because, like I said to him, like I have beaten myself up for years because in my head I quit. And he was like, he heard the story and then was like, I can't believe you lasted as long as you did, which is quite funny. Talk about reframing it. So like injuries, as I said, like a big part of my career. So I injured my left knee 2004, about a month before the Six Nations. I was out for 15 months with that. Managed to get back, played for about a year, played for Scotland again, and then injured my right knee. Was out for 9 months, I think, for that one. And by that point, uh, as well as had just become a father for the first time, as well as my dad was terminal with cancer, so there was a lot going on,
Yeah.
and I was like, and I still struggle a little bit with this one, but because I was actually fit to play when I retired, but I was emotionally, psychologically done with
Hmm.
playing. And it's difficult because I was only 28, so I mean, if the scenario had maybe been a bit different, I probably could have played longer. But yeah, no, I decided to walk away, and it's a really good example of not being really careful of the big life decisions you make without taking into consideration the other stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
I've been probably not in the best place to make this decision. I mean, I'm kind of mentioned briefly the drug addiction stuff, so that had started to creep in towards the end of my rugby career.
Okay.
So yeah, and as well, I mean, yeah, as well as, I mean, the drinking was a big part of what we did. But yeah, I'm able to look back now and reflect on my knowing what I know about mental health now, look back and go, right, like I was like a really bad place when I made all that decision to retire. But when you're asking about the kind of resilience thing and the kind of loss of identity thing, like when I knew I was going to be on this podcast, I was like, right, let's take a step back and go, right, what kind of what moments in your life, if you like, have you shown resilience? And and like, what did you learn from those experiences?
Mm.
And I think the period after I retired was really dark, really, really dark. Um, like I was in an awful lot of pain, like not physically necessarily, but like, yeah, emotionally, I would say. And I didn't even really know it, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
I was in like a world of bother and just, yeah, like lost at sea with it. And I think I kept going because I felt like I had to, would be how I put it. Speaking to somebody recently who's recovering from cancer, and just saying to them, listen, like, I think it's amazing what you're doing, the how resilient you are being through all of this. And their answer was really interesting because they were like, I don't really feel like I've got a choice. I just have to do this. And I was a bit like,
Yeah.
wow, that's so interesting, because I remember thinking about it earlier on, like we always have a choice. Like with that
Yeah.
sort of stuff, of course we do. Um, and and it just made me think about that particular period when I mean, I was suicidal at the time, but my daughter was, what, she'd have been 2 or 3, and when those thoughts were very present, it was like that's the thing that kind of kept me going,
Yeah.
um, and stopped me from going further down that path. So I mean, I don't know if that's resilience or not. Um, but
Yeah. Because resilience is about making different choices, isn't it? To the ones that are detrimental.
yeah. So yeah, I suppose it's just choosing to continue even though you really don't want to, for 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 other reasons apart from yourself, I suppose. Would be perhaps how it's difficult to talk about, as in it's difficult to put it into words.
Yeah.
But yeah. Um, and then the other kind of resilience pivot point, if you like, was after about 6 years and being in a bad place with painkillers and drink, and basically going, right, like this is starting to get quite scary. Like, what am I going to do about this? And taking the decision, right, let's take ownership over this. There is something you can do. let's get the help you need. Um, yeah, and then yeah, as I said, like checking myself into rehab in 2015.
Yeah. Yeah. Big decision to make for yourself, isn't it? If you did that on your own.
Yes, I did that on my own.
Yeah. Fair play.
Uh,
That's yeah, yeah. That's what spurred that on?
um, and this is quite kind of illuminative as to my kind of thought process and who I am. Like, uh, I started to reach the point where I was like, I'm really struggling to keep this under wraps. Like,
Okay.
as in, it was a fear of being caught out. Basically, was the driver for me because the plates were spinning and they were really starting to wobble. And I was yeah, and I mean, I can. It's funny your memory. Like I distinctly remember that night when the plates were frantically wobbling. And I don't know if you ever had it. It was horrible. I hope you haven't. But it's sleep paralysis. I'm not sure if that's something you've ever come across, but that
Yeah.
started to be like a nightly thing.
Okay.
And yeah, it was horrible. I mean, it's just kind of like talk about like your subconscious like roaring at you. And yeah, and just after one particularly terrifying experience, I just woke up and at 4 o'clock in the morning, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Let's the alternative is no longer scary than the current situation. So
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's yeah. That's a good prompt, isn't it?
Hmm.
Yeah. Nice one. So how was the kind of the recovery piece?
Yeah, what a great question. Really interesting one. And God, I've learned so much from that experience. I think the first thing I would say is like it was a month and like talk about like dealing with the symptoms, but not necessarily dealing with the underlying cause. So you get sober, and it's, I mean, they said it to us when we were there. It's a bit like, listen, this is the easy part. And when you leave, that's when the real work begins. And I was a bit like, really? Because this is actually really fucking hard. So that's concerning. But no, like I'm able to reflect back and go, right, like, wow, that's really, really true. Because what you're basically doing is you're taking away someone's coping mechanism. And then I think it's Gabor Mate says it beautifully. I remember coming across this quote in quite early on in recovery. It was like, "Don't ask why the drugs, ask why the pain,"
Mhm.
which I thought was an incredibly profound thing to think about because I was
Yes.
a bit like, "Oh right, wow, okay," like, and it's one of the next bit of kind of understanding, which was really helpful actually, was that like behaviors are always solutions to a problem.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I was wow, okay, I'd never really thought about it that way. And the next kind of thought, if you like, was like I'm quite an extreme person. So, and like once again, it's one of those scenarios where it's been like sometimes that's great, sometimes not so good. Like great as a rugby player, like
Yeah.
brilliant, but not great as a alcoholic. That's a terrible. Not great when it comes to drinking, if you like. So it's been like it's that kind of all or nothing. Like if I'm going to have one glass of red wine, I'm going to have two bottles. Like it's just there's no moderation there, which, as I said, sometimes is a great tool. But yeah, no, it was understanding that, and then as well as just getting this idea of being like the more extreme the behavior, perhaps the more extreme the underlying problem is. Was
Yeah.
was one kind of thing I kind of thought about, and I mean it's been got to be 10 years this year, and it's I think probably the biggest thing I struggled with early on. I've kind of managed to make my peace with it a little bit now, off the back of what I just said about like the behavior being the solution to the problem thing. Like a huge amount of shame, huge amount of guilt for the people that I hurt, and like embarrassment, and just like talk about like a kind of restart self-esteem thing, self-worth thing, and having to feeling like
Yeah.
you're rebuilding that one from kind of scratch, after getting yourself into that position, and then making the decision to try and stop, and then yeah, he's kind of hitting the restart button.
Yes. Start with a clean slate.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And just yeah, it's yeah, it's there's so much in it. As I said, like 10 years, and like I think the other thing that I sometimes fall into the trap of is like there'll be a point where I reach where I understand it and everything's fine and I figured everything out and I know what I'm doing, etc., etc. And it's trying to let go of that need for certainty, and just accept that there's there's always going to be shades of grey. There's always going to be nuance, and
Yeah.
actually, if you can recognize that and get comfortable with that shade of grey and that uncertainty and that nuance, actually, how capable it can make you.
Yes. Yeah. Because there's very little in life is
Certain, yeah,
it's yeah, everything's shades of grey.
yeah, yeah,
Not
absolutely.
much is truly binary, really, is it?
No, I think what was it? I'm sure I've heard this somewhere. Like, the only thing certain in life is death and taxes. I think that's a quote from a film.
Yeah.
And I was really like, wow, that's such a good line because it's so right.
Yes. There's the, the life of me. I can't remember the. Can't remember the. Here we go. Yeah. I put this quote at the beginning of my book, right? There is nothing permanent except change.
Yeah.
Change is the only constant. Change alone is unchanging. Heraclitus.
Oh, well, there we go.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of wisdom
Yeah,
from the
yeah,
ages, isn't there?
yeah. The change thing is really interesting, because that came up for me. Well, because I last about this time last year, I ruptured my bicep tendon, and for what that brought up for me was how much I would fight against change and try and maintain control. And then I
Right.
was forced into a position where couldn't I couldn't control it. I just had to like speaking to the surgeon, he was like, this is gonna take 6 months to heal. And I was like, I was hearing him go, I'm gonna do this in 4. And and then just realizing that it's a tendon is just it's not you can't just out train this. So like I went through
Yeah.
like a real wrestling period with that, like how uncomfortable I am with change, and just did a bit of reading about it, and yeah, like that the only constant is change kind of idea, and listening to somebody talk about it, and I think the example they used was really interesting, like post kind of COVID, saying like, oh God, when's everything going to go back to the way it was, and that kind of that very statement is like it's never going to go back to the way it was. Like life
Yeah.
never does. And I was a bit
Yeah.
like, right, okay, wow. So trying to kind of come to terms with that in relation to the injuries that I have, uh, and then being like, right, like, yeah, that's going to change. You can't do anything about it. Being like, right, but you can kind of adapt and evolve, I suppose. Actually, yeah.
Yeah. That's that's the it's the biggest thing I one of the biggest elements I have to work with people is very often fear of change,
Hmm.
their unwillingness to change when they know they need to for themselves, and when
Yeah,
things are happening around them that they don't want to happen.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
we are the only thing we have control of in our world.
hmm, yeah,
Bugger
um,
all control of anything outside of us, really.
yeah. Well, it's I don't think that this isn't the kind of definition of fitness when it comes to like a gym environment. Well, I suppose it could possibly could be the whole kind of survival of the fittest, like adapt to your environment, Darwin, all that sort
Yeah,
of stuff. Like that is when you go to a gym, that's kind of what you're actually doing is you are intentionally stressing yourself so that you'll adapt to that new stressor.
yeah,
And if you go in there being like, I want nothing to change, you'd be like, right, well, you're not going to get any of the stuff that you want out of this experience.
yeah,
Um, but it's interesting that fear, that uncertainty, and that discomfort with change. I mean, I have to be quite mindful of it myself.
yes, and it's a hard thing to be aware of when you're
Hmm.
doing things that are essentially self-sabotaging.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
hard to be aware of yourself, and it's a hard thing to change yourself.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is from your work, Simon. I hope you don't mind me quoting you.
Go for it.
No, no, it's just it really landed with me because it's right where I'm at the moment with the work I'm trying to do with myself. Was the most important relationship you ever have in your life is with yourself. Um, like I love that because I was like, that seems to me being like, right, we're starting to get to the kind of the nitty gritty here of of what I really do need to do.
Yeah, and this is, from personal, my own life experience, and
Mhm.
from learning from others
Yeah,
of their life experience, and also academically.
yeah,
It's, we've until we're truly happy. Well, are we ever truly happy? As long when we can become content in our own skin,
mhm,
because
yeah,
happiness is fleeting, it comes and goes.
yeah,
But we can be content with our lot,
mhm,
just not necessarily happy with it all the time.
yeah. I remember somebody. The happy thing is interesting because, like, I remember saying that to somebody, being like, "He was like, what do you want?" I was, "I just want to be happy." And he was like, "Okay, cool." Imagine if I click my fingers and you were happy all the time. You'd be like, "Is that not like a form of like madness?" And I was a bit like, "Actually, you know what? Right, okay." So I went away and kind of thought, right, what do I want? And I mean, this is just me. I came up with the tranquility was what I was like, right, okay, that's the
Yeah,
word that resonates because that, yeah, and it was really, really it was. I found it fascinating. I was reading about a guy who's an American football player and like incredible Hall of Fame, like won like 3 Super Bowls, I think, and we talk about somebody with nothing left to prove. But then when he finished playing, he then launched into like multiple businesses, commentating, XYZ, still trained as if he was playing on a Sunday, all this sort of stuff. And but then the kind of flip side, well, so externally, everyone's like, wow, look at this guy. He's like, he's just rolled into this and he's so successful. But in the background, there were 3 failed marriages, like problems with alcohol and things like this. And then being like,
yeah,
and it's so interesting because the kind of powerful statement because it resonated so much with me, which was basically he reached the point where he realized that the very characteristics which allowed him to reach the heights he did to in his sporting career were the exact same characteristics were going to stop him from finding tranquility now that he'd retired. And I was a bit like,
yeah,
wow, okay. Um, yeah, that really resonated with me. Really, yeah, just I mean, I've never won the Super Bowl, but I was a bit like I can kind of like I can identify with that.
yeah. That it's that ethos of never quit. It's push, push, push,
Yeah,
and never quit.
yeah,
It's sometimes it's not about it's not quitting. It's stopping doing something that's not bloody useful.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the like I was saying earlier on, the kind of difference between giving up and letting go thing, um,
Mm,
and it's fascinating because at the time it was a fairly brutal experience, but the
yeah.
amount of learning I got from it was amazing. So I was really fortunate to be invited on a like one of these like men's mental health retreats that somebody was
Okay.
running. So I went along, and I'm like super open minded with this sort of stuff. So like some of it was a bit wild, I suppose, in a way, but it was, I mean, like we're like dancing around the forest and all this sort of stuff. So, but it was an incredible experience. But one of the things we did, and it's that it touches on that kind of like do not give up thing. So one of the things we did was a sweat lodge.
Yeah.
And like everything else we'd done that week, I managed it. I was like, like it'd be fine. But that sweat lodge, um, it wasn't the heat that bothered me. It was the fact that we were really crushed in there. And I basically had a bit of a panic attack at the
Okay.
kind of claustrophobia of it and left. And the whole kind of idea behind was interesting because it was like that you choose to remember things or you choose to listen to things. So what they said beforehand, they were like, listen, this experience, it'll show you what you need to see. So don't think getting through it is necessarily what you need to hear. And I remember coming out of that and quitting. In my head, I was like, I've just quit. Just like the negative, abusive voice in my head, it just roared out of me because I had been incredibly uncomfortable and like
Yeah.
made a decision to look after myself. And but like it was this "you do not quit" voice, and he was like, "Who are you if you quit?" Um, but the really powerful lesson for me in that was that once everyone had finished, we all went and had dinner, and in my head, I was feeling ashamed. I feel like I'd let everyone down, and this was the voice in my head. But they embraced me for it, and they didn't reject me. And it was just an example of like this idea in my head of who I think I should be, just being completely turned on its head, and being like, right, wow, like this negative inner voice, it's just coming from you. No one else thinks like that. You're not going to
Yeah.
be rejected if you quit, and things like that. It's just a really, really interesting and kind of powerful experience to have.
Yeah. It's uncomfortable, isn't it? That's and it certainly sticks in your memory
Yeah.
because of
um
that
yeah.
discomfort. And I mean, I have no doubt you took a lot from that.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. And I mean, they said to us, they were like, "Listen, the whole point of this week is to take you to your edge,"
Yeah.
and that was my edge. So, and I do reflect back on it, because that that kind of experience of quitting, that sat with me for really quite a long time after it, and I would relive it and give myself a hard time. So it's taken quite a long time to kind of process that, um, but it has definitely been a really powerful lesson for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I, I can I can relate to that whole frustration over feeling like you've quitted or something.
Mm, yeah.
Is
and,
a
and yeah, and what it then means, like who you are, as well as the kind of, I think, as I said earlier on, like belonging to a team is like a really
Yeah.
fundamental part of who I am, and that feeling of now I'm going to be pushed out, I'm going to be on my own again, just brought up a hugely emotional reaction from me.
Yeah. And it's just good feedback, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, yeah,
And it's
painful,
got
yes.
yeah, it does. It does sting at the time, that's for sure. But
When you remember it, right?
oh oh yeah.
Yeah, we're
It's
gonna make
it's
this. You really need to remember this one, so we're gonna make it really fucking sore.
yes, it's visceral, it's raw, it's yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It kicks you when you're down.
yeah, absolutely.
Feels like it anyway.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
It's now there's I suppose with what thinking about that strength in all capacities has been an integral part of your life, really, isn't it?
Mm, yeah.
And with what you're doing now, being as a strength coach
Hmm.
and extending that into people's lives as well, not just in the gym.
Hmm.
Um, and I really love that in your bio, about being authentic and doing it this in a compassionate way.
Yeah.
To because there's enough shit going on in the world and life and people's lives without adding to it. Um, how have your own your challenges, your experiences, your wrestles with your wrestling with your own resilience?
Hmm.
How's that helped you or inspired you even to do the things the way you do them now with your clients?
What a great question. It has had a massive, massive impact on my coaching philosophy.
Mm,
Um, I think I think there's real power in vulnerability, and
yes.
authenticity from somebody who perhaps looks like I look, who is sitting in a position of like strength coach, ex international rugby player. And then there's real power in me being able to sit with somebody and go, listen, like I'm going to be vulnerable with you. I'm going to show you compassion, and it's this like how I imagine it, it's almost like I'm going to walk to the middle of this branch, like showing a little bit of vulnerability, and then I basically it's my invitation to you. If you want to come and meet me in the middle here, that's brilliant. But I've created that safety for you to be able to do that by me doing it first.
Yeah.
Would be like the big thing, and just it's a bit like we were saying about the parenting, right? You parent the way you wanted to be parented. It's been like I'm driven to coach the way I wish I'd been coached, which is
Yeah. Okay.
with love and with compassion and like, um, yeah, no, and I come back to that in a wee second because there's another the other bit is the authenticity bit, and I think that's really powerful as well because there's not a huge amount of people out there who are comfortable saying they don't know or this or they're trying to sell something by kind of guaranteeing results or as opposed to being like, listen, like you choose what we're gonna you choose the goal, here's the plan, we're gonna try this. Like I think I know what's gonna happen. Um, but let's try this out together and see what happens, as opposed to being like, you do what I say, you'll get X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I am the fountain of knowledge. And I think the other thing of the authenticity thing, which has really impacted my coaching as well, is being able to share times when I have tried and failed, because I think it normalizes and makes it safe for people to try and fail, as well as I share about like crazy things that I did training wise, which I thought were going to provide me something, which actually didn't provide me that at all. And it's
Yeah.
been like, so if you're doing some crazy training, that's fine. I'm here to support you, but here's my story about it. And like at the end of it, like I did this crazy thing. Like I ran like was it around 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours
Oh yeah.
was the challenge thing, right? And I ran it with a weighted vest on, and like I went into that thinking it was going to be some sort of like spiritual experience, and I was going to learn something like really impactful about myself. And I got to the end of it, and literally, I was just really tired, and I had blisters on my feet, and I felt no different from having done it. Which is, I'm joking about it a little bit, but like, I think that probably from that experience there, like the thing that I learned about myself from that experience was I did it on my own, and I was a bit like, you know what, like we were saying earlier on, like people matter, community matters, connection matters. Doing all you're massively selling yourself short with this sort of stuff if you choose to do it on your own.
Yeah.
So that was probably the main kind of takeaway. But yeah, no, like my experiences have massively shaped my coaching style, um, as well as I think because I have had some challenges in life, and have worked on them and continue to work on them. Like I think it's allowed, like it's really allowed me to develop my empathy, which I hope I kind of put across with people. So that's the kind of the compassion piece here, being like, yeah, let's be human to each other, and
Yeah.
through that process, hopefully we can achieve all the stuff you want to achieve, but it doesn't have to be like a combative backwards and forwards. Like this, we
Yeah.
should be in this together.
Yeah. Oh, it's for horses for courses, isn't it? Some people like, we were very much, I think we are very similar creatures in many ways. And, we thrived on that kind of combative approach
Yeah.
when we were younger. Now, not so much.
No.
And it's
No.
that's part of the process of a coach, isn't it? It's figuring out where somebody's at
Yeah.
to start from.
Yeah. I mean, coaching's. I mean, it's such a fascinating topic, and like I reflect back on some of the coaches I had in rugby, and I've not quite kind of landed on quite why, but one of the coaches that I played for that I probably played for the best was actually the one who was verbally and physically abusive with us. And I was like, it's fascinating, kind of indicator of my conditioning, or whatever you want to call it, that that's the player, that's the coach that I played the best for, because it felt like life or death playing for him.
Yeah.
Because yeah, but then I also am able to reflect back and go, right, okay, so I was playing well. What else was going on? I was bursting of tears in my flat during when we weren't at training. I was drinking to oblivion every weekend after the games because of the amount of stress I was under.
Yeah.
And then it cropped up recently. I'm not sure if you saw it, but the kind of interview about Eddie Jones's coaching style.
Yeah.
I was a little bit taken aback that that's still going on. Fair enough. Um, but his kind of books dropped. his kind of rejoinder is the word. His kind of comeback against all of the ways that he treated the players and his coaches was like, we won the games, and I'm a bit
Yeah.
like, in a way, he's been hired to win games, so in a way, I understand where he's coming from,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's tricky. It's a really tricky needle thread. What's your priority here? Winning above all else, or nurturing the people with you and winning in the right way?
Yeah. Yeah. Because that, in simple terms, that works until it doesn't.
Yeah,
And then it got to the point it didn't.
yeah. Well, 100%. And that coach I was talking about, he got. I think we won our first 4 games with this new like hardcore approach, and then he didn't have like a plan B, so that was his only approach, and he just
Okay.
basically battered us into submission. So there was the initial jump in performance because we're all like, oh fuck, we better pull our socks up here.
Yeah.
And but then it was relentless, and it just eroded, and he ended up getting sacked after a year. So 100%, like, it works until it doesn't work.
Yeah. And it's, yeah, you've got to have more in your arsenal than the
Yeah,
stick.
yeah. Um, like, like with the coaching thing again, like I've done a bit of kind of coach mentoring stuff with younger coaches, and that's one of the things I always kind of try and suggest to them to have to think about, trying to be like agile coaches,
Yeah.
so that we can be like, the person in front of me right now, what do they need? Not, this is how I do this. And like, yeah, are you able to adjust your approach for the person in front of you, and are you even able to pick up on what what they probably need? Because it might
Well,
not be getting
yes.
shouted at. What's that?
Yeah. Yeah. I've met a few like that over the years.
Yeah,
People have had influence in my life for all sorts of reasons.
yeah.
Yeah. So what's the most rewarding thing for you at the moment with as a with the strength coaching? Um, because there's a lot of different pieces that tie in from kind of your life up to now.
Mm,
There's lots of different spokes to this, isn't there,
yeah.
that come into where this central point of coaching. Um, yeah, what's the most rewarding piece for you?
I think, I mean, you kind of said it there. So I think it's taken me a really long time to get here, and that's okay, because I obviously needed to work through this.
Yeah,
But like I feel like in a place like you just asked me about how my life has influenced my coaching, and hopefully I was able to give you like a pretty kind of cognizant answer to that. Like, I know the answer to that. This is how it has had the impact. So I feel
yeah,
like I'm basically in a position now where I'm like, do you know what? Like, I have a coaching philosophy that I believe in, that comes from me, that I now want to go out and work with people using that. And it's taken me a really long time to get there, because for a really long time I wasn't really able to acknowledge perhaps my strengths, and I was always looking to other people to be like, oh, I need to be like them, or I need to be like them, as opposed to taking the time to kind of do the self reflection, do the work, and get to a point where we go, well, no, do you know what? Like, right, I believe in this. Let's give it a shot. Is where I'm, and just reaching that point is really rewarding, because it has taken a really long time, and it's required an awful lot of work on myself to get to that point.
yes,
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. You'll obviously know Maslow's hierarchy.
Yeah.
You've seen the extended version.
I'm not sure I've seen the extended version.
Yeah, yes. There's the extra piece of that, after the self-actualization, which so where you're at, you've
Okay,
reached
wow.
that point.
Yeah,
For me, that definitely hits that spot because you've got to that point of self-actualization of knowing where you're at and
yeah, yeah.
how you've got there and why
Hmm.
and what you've got at your disposal now.
Yeah.
And that the extended piece goes into transcendence, into actually helping others to reach that point,
Ah, nice.
which was a nice addition.
Yeah. Did he add that on laterally?
That was other people did that
Oh, wow.
after he shuffled off.
Okay. Wow, nice. Uh,
Um, so which I think is and I think that to get to that point takes a huge amount of resilience to get to
yeah,
that point
yeah.
because
Um,
there's as you say there's a lot of self work you've got to do with on yourself for yourself in order to get to that level.
mhm, yeah. Um, yeah. I think it's getting comfortable. I'd love to know what you, because obviously the arenas you work in, the work that you do, I'd love to know what you think about this as well. But it's getting to the point where you feel comfortable, like being able to put your ideas out there without ever feeling like, listen, I'm not saying I've got the answer to everything here. This is just my take, my experience, backed up by the work, and being like, but just yeah, just getting to that point has been a struggle.
It's it yeah
Yeah.
it takes a while to get to the point of gut and there's for lack of a better expression there's a huge amount of do you know what actually I don't give a fuck anymore
Yes. Yes.
that
Yeah.
yeah I don't give a fuck anymore people either like it or they don't.
Yeah.
Oh, why do people sometimes just not get the message that you're not available to speak?
Just keep phoning.
3 times.
Yeah.
In fact, that was the
Um,
fourth time that person phoned. Never mind.
yeah. That's so fascinating about the getting to the point where you don't give a fuck anymore. Like there's a conversation I've had with a really good friend of mine, being like, we're both kind of wired similarly, and being like, right, what's the thing that's holding me back here? And the more I examine it, the more I realize it's actually probably me. It's holding me back. But being able to look at it and go like, wow, like imagine how freeing it would be just to not care and just go, let's just give this a shot and
Yeah,
see what happens. Yes.
but
Uh,
it's in a really healthy way with a really
yeah.
positive intent. It's no disrespect or
No.
judgment on anybody else. It's just the fact that I really don't give a shit whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
I hope you do because there's some useful stuff.
Mm.
And if you think I'm full of shit, great, fine, you crack on.
Yeah. I think I couldn't agree more, because it's like the intention is there to help, but
Yes.
as you say, like you can like it or not like it, and that's fine. Um, but also being like perhaps reaching a point in your life where you're like, do you know what? Like, I really believe in this. Like, this is intrinsic to me, and I want to share it with people. Is how it kind of feels.
Yes. And it's funny how things happen because we've got to meet
Mm,
because of something I'm doing that I really believe in.
yes. Yeah.
So this is how this is how our meeting has come about,
Yeah.
and I'm hugely grateful for that. So
Yeah. No. No. Me too, Simon. Me too.
Andrew Hall, thank you very much.
Yes. No. Thank you for inviting me. As I said, honored to be asked.
Um, So I'm just kind of looking at. I made some things, some notes of things to that I wanted to kind of tap into.
Mm,
Um, because again, going back to your bio right at the start,
mm,
very, very clearly values driven life, and you've got a very clear understanding and grasp of what your core values are.
mm.
When did that come about? How long, when did you become sort of aware of or do the work to find out what the bloody hell they are?
Yeah. So when I was coaching with the guys I coached up with in Edinburgh,
Hmm.
they asked me, they were like, "Can you look at our culture? Can you look at our leadership?" They were like you clearly have a good grasp of this stuff. Can you look at our goal setting processes? And the leadership thing was funny. Like, this is a bit of a segue, but it's interesting. I don't know if you've had the same experience, but like they asked me to do it because they were like, "Listen, like you just got like leadership coming out of you," and I'm a bit like, "Really? Okay, thanks." And I was, I suppose, I have had leadership positions throughout my life, like
Yep.
playing rugby and all this sort of stuff. And like the month I spent in rehab, I ended up being the lead patient. So I was even leading in rehab. um, but yeah, no. So it was just really interesting because I never thought about or tried to reverse engineer. Like, what am I actually doing here? Like, I'm just doing it. I've never thought about it. No one's ever taught me. I've never read a book about it.
Okay.
Um, but so that was just, it was a kind of, that was the first step, and then the next bit was, right, let's look at the goal setting, because at the moment it's really disjointed and doesn't make a huge amount of sense. And I came across, so I've done my precision nutrition level 2 coaching, and the nutrition stuff's okay. Like, very sorry, the nutrition stuff's very good. I'm just not massively interested in nutrition. But what they did really, the bits of the course I really loved were the change psychology stuff.
Okay.
Um, and and it was talking about, like, right, where do you start with somebody? You start with them by helping them understand who they are, what their values are, what their priorities are. And I was like, wow, like, how fascinating is. And the identity bit really jumped out at me. um
Okay.
that's that bio, that's why it leads with, like, father, coach, this is who I am.
Yeah.
Because, and talk about resilience, actually, because there was actually an example from the gym, when we had a member who was in a really bad place. We didn't know that at the time. They joined the gym and it was just a complete disaster. And they ended up posting something on LinkedIn, and it was basically just a takedown of us at the gym and the things we were trying to do and all this sort of stuff. It was wild. It was completely like, you'd read it and go, right, this is clearly nonsense. This person's clearly not okay. But I took it incredibly hard. The fact that the stuff that he'd written, even though it wasn't really based in reality, I took it incredibly hard. And because, yeah, I took it incredibly hard because I realized off the back of that, I was like, good God, if I attach my whole self worth, my whole sense of self to my job as a coach, how resilient does that make me? Because great when things are going well, not so good when you hit bumps in the road.
Yeah.
Um, so that was when I first looked into that, being like, I remember sitting in the office of the gym being like, God, like, why do I feel so badly? And then just going, right, I'm going to write down the other things I am in my life outside of a coach. And I got a big, huge list of brother, son, father, friend, all this sort of stuff. I'm like, right, okay, like, so having a really clear idea of that means that when the coaching bit isn't going great, I can fall back on the other things that I have in my life, which really matter to
Yes.
me. Um, and the kind of finishing kind of bit on that one was, once again, like a big American football fan. Like, we used two American football analogies, but it always seemed to me it was like a kind of Hollywood version of rugby. um, and
That's a nice way of putting it. Yeah, I
yeah,
like that.
um, and but no, I was reading about these American football players in America who they have this thing, this little mantra that they say, which is faith, family, football.
Okay.
And I'm not religious, so I don't necessarily. Well, I respect that they have that thought process, but It's not mine. But what I loved about it was that the way they described it is having that framework, faith, family, then football, meant that when things were amazing, they didn't get too high. When things were bad, they didn't get too low. We're talking about football, like so performance on a Sunday. If they won, they didn't get too high. If they lost, they didn't get too low because they always had that hierarchy of going back to, I've always
Yes.
got my faith, I've always got my family. So no matter what happens to football, I'm going to be okay. And I just love that. I just really love that.
Yeah, because it's not just about the game.
Yeah, yeah,
There's more to it, and there's more to life.
yes. I think probably the reason it resonated as much is, as I said earlier on, about that complete loss of identity after I stopped playing rugby, and that
Yeah.
like literally feeling like looking in the mirror and being like, I genuinely just don't know who I am. Like this is so disorientating. So yeah, like reading about that, being like, right, okay, like this is a way of helping me manage that. And I was speaking, in fact, it was Andy, who's a friend of mine who introduced us, who's been on your podcast. I was talking to him about this the other day, about like when he was playing down in Wales, the coaches gave a talk about how the research was basically saying that having like dual interests was actually
Yeah.
really great for performance
Yeah.
because you weren't all in on one thing. So and I was a bit like that's 100% what I would say to young athletes now is develop who you are as a whole person because I
Yeah.
guarantee you it's going to make you a better rugby player. But I shouldn't say guarantee. I believe that it will make you a better rugby player.
Yes. The likelihood is bloody good.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I had a great chat with
Mm,
Andy. And he said similar things actually in terms
right.
of the identity piece. From leaving
Yeah,
professional rugby, going, what the fuck do I do now? Who am I? What am I? How am I?
yeah. How do I
Uh,
behave?
yeah. Yeah.
It's wild. Yeah, really strange. Yeah, no,
Yes.
no.
Strange place to be, isn't it? Because you feel really in limbo,
Yes, yes,
which can feel uncomfortable.
yes. Yeah, I mean, I look at, from speaking to other guys that I played with, like it seems to be pretty like there's a sliding scale of how much it impacted guys. Some guys really struggle, like I did. Some guys struggle a little bit and then kind of figured out a way forward. Um, I remember listening to somebody talking on a podcast. It was actually about soldiers, and they were talking about like why do some soldiers struggle so much when they retire. I mean, there is similarities there, but
There
the
are.
guy was saying the podcast host who was ex-military himself was like he was like it seems to me that the guys that really struggle after they retire are the guys who were their job, that's who they were soldiers, and then the guys that seemed because these it was like it doesn't make sense in a way because both coming from the same regiment, perhaps, both been through the same experiences, then one struggles, one doesn't. And he was like, the guy that really struggles is the one who was wrapped up. That was who he was. And the one that perhaps does better is the one who had maybe a bit of a rounder, a kind of fuller view of life.
Yeah. Yes.
Um, I mean,
That's
has that been your experience with
yeah.
veterans?
Yeah. The combination of that, the guys who've been in for a longer period of time, served for longer, and that was,
Yeah,
and that was it. That was their entire world.
yeah,
And the ones that joined young and left young.
ah,
So they had no life experience before they joined. And all they had was the military. And then, they did 4 years and left. So by the time they're 2021, they don't
yeah,
know their arse from their elbow outside of the military,
yeah,
which is a hard place to be.
yeah. I mean that's really interesting. I'd never thought about it that way because there's another parallel to rugby there now as well. In that when I was coming up, there wasn't like high performance academies and things. There are
Yeah,
now, which is great. But I remember speaking to a few people about it, and they'll be like, "That all sounds amazing. What happens to the guys that don't make it? Because you are taking
yeah,
a chunk of their like fifth from the age of 15 to 21. They're not all going to sign pro contracts. How are you supporting the ones that don't? Because I was like, that will be a tough pill to swallow at the age
yeah.
of 21. And if you just cast them aside, I don't think you are doing a duty of care there.
No, no, because it's yeah, it is. It's a hell of a shock and
Mm.
that level of rejection when you've been fighting so hard for that
Yeah, yeah,
to achieve that level and not making it. Yeah, that's feedback that's got to be delivered carefully. That's for sure.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, with real compassion.
Yeah, 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 because that it's that make or break, isn't it,
Yeah,
of somebody at that point.
yeah,
Yeah, I do. I love the fact that you just you live and work. There's no distinction in terms of how you apply your values.
yeah. Well, thank you. It's actually been one of the stumbling blocks to me actually doing the strength coaching stuff, um, because I really wrestled with, because if I'm saying that authenticity is like really important to what I do, I really wrestled with the how do I justify charging people for this? Because like if I'm being authentic, like I genuinely care about you and I genuinely want to help you, like that's been a tricky one. And
Yeah,
it was a I don't know if I've said this to you before. It was a Simon Sinek, the guy that starts with Y guy.
yeah,
Um, I can't. It's interesting because I googled this. I can't actually find it. I'm certain he said this, but he was talking about leadership. He was like, "Is one sentence: love them, give them direction." And I was a bit like, right, okay, like that. That was just so powerful for me because it was like it
mhm,
just made sense, and it's interesting as well because it was like kind of sounds like parenting, kind of sounds like coaching, kind of sounds like leadership. Love them, give them some direction, and so how that has helped me kind of make my peace with putting myself out there as a kind of this is why we charge you to do this. It was the relationship bit is free, the direction bit is where I charge you for it. Like that's because that's
yes,
the framework I'm giving you. But the
yeah,
relationship bit, that's important to me that this is genuine, and we generally care about each other, and that's the kind of human bit. But then the framework bit is the kind of yeah the bit that I'm like I feel much more comfortable charging for that.
nice. I like that. I like the way you frame that.
Mm,
That's very
yeah,
nice. Very
yeah.
nice. Oh, here's a question for you that actually seems quite appropriate time to ask.
Mm.
So, how do you continue to cultivate compassion for yourself after
Oof,
all, after having experienced, the highs and lows in your life?
what a great question. Um, I trying to figure out what works for me would be the first thing, as in tools that I use on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So once again, this is me talking about stuff that I've learned from you, Simon, in the last 3 weeks. So the negative, well, it's great because it's just been really helpful to kind of condense down and like simplify and like clearly like condense a lot of stuff that was kind of flying around my head. But the kind of the hopefully I get this right, the negative thought interrupt or negative thought pattern interrupt stuff that you talk about.
Yes.
Um, that's been really powerful, and as well as the because that, as I've been sort of saying quite a lot, like a huge area that I'm working on at the moment is kind of compassionately trying to challenge that negative internal dialogue that I have,
Yeah.
because it's as with the work I'm doing with therapists, he's helping me with that as well because it's been like right, like it's there for a reason. It's there because it thinks it's protecting you, but
Yeah.
it's then almost being able to say, do you know what? Thanks for what you did, but you are like 30 years like out of date now, and
Yeah.
thank you for what you did, but I no longer need you anymore. Is the kind of conversation, if you like, that I'm having with myself, um, and it's my kind of current kind of goal is trying to see myself as others see me. Um, is the kind of goal. I really struggle with that sort of stuff because like I think it's the kind of Scottish slash British in me. I mean, a bit like don't want to come across as being like really kind of vain and arrogant, and or you could just listen to the feedback you've been given over the years and be like kind of right, okay, like this is seems to be like a consistent message you're getting from people. So maybe there's some validity in that.
Okay.
And then the last thing once again from you was the writing down the kind of negative thoughts you have about yourself and then kind of challenging them on the other side. Has been really really helpful because I'd actually started that just in my own head about a month ago.
Okay.
Yeah, and then hearing you talk about it, I was like, all right, okay, cool. This is actually like a thing that I can do. So it's been like right looking at the kind of the kind of core negative messages that I get. So one of mine is like a lack of intelligence. Like I don't have a university degree yet. Maybe I will. Don't have a university degree, and I dyslexic. So at school, I very much got the message of you're stupid. Here's a special class for you to go and sit in, and that has kind of lingered. And it's like I've actually got it up in front of me. There's a little note of like three things that I'm like. These are characteristics that I have that I want to start kind of owning and believing in, and intelligent is one.
Nice.
Hmm.
Like that. Good effort.
Yeah, and this is the authenticity bit. Meditation, like I I try, and I go through great periods where I get so much from it, and then for whatever reason, I've not quite put my finger on it. Why I just kind of drift away from it a little bit. But like my experience of it has been incredibly positive, and it's a work in progress to try and figure out how to how to get it as a consistent anchor in my life as opposed to dipping in and out of it. Because
Okay.
it's something I believe in. It's something I say to people. This is great. You might want to try it, but I just haven't quite nailed that one.
Well, that's definitely authentic, isn't it? Being vulnerable that you do continue to cultivate your own
Yeah,
compassion for
yeah,
yourself. It's a
yeah,
work in progress.
yeah. 100%. I think that's once again that's the kind of with the coaching stuff like that. Like I think that's really important to say to people because I get to my back up a little bit when I come across people who are trying to project that they've got everything kind of figured out and it's just I'm a little bit like, so you don't struggle at all with anything. You're doing all these amazing things. That's wonderful. But I'm a little bit like, I don't know if I believe that. um,
Yeah.
and then be like, what would be much more powerful is tell me about the stuff you grab, but tell me about the stuff you find difficult because maybe that'll that'll like make our connection so much more powerful because we share a little bit of like vulnerability together.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, I've got two things left.
Yeah.
So for people who are gonna hear this, see this, watch this,
Mm,
um, through the Resilience Connection,
mm,
and after that, when it's out fully public on YouTube,
yeah.
for anybody who's facing setbacks, whether it's career, personal life, mental health, whatever it is, what would you say to them about resilience and hope?
Ooh, wow. Uh, I think I'd probably go back to what we were chatting about earlier on, being the most important relationship you're ever going to have is a relationship with yourself. And I think it's not always easy, but cultivating like self awareness, self compassion, like I don't want to talk in black and whites, but it's made such a massive impact on me that I would really encourage people to at least try it or get help to try it. Because yeah, it does. Yeah, it's made a massive impact on me. And it has changed and continues to change my life. So it'd be like I want to share this with you right now. And I think the other thing which I really believe in really strongly at the moment, it's coming up for me a lot, conversations I have with people as well, is being like validate your own feelings. And like a really powerful thing that you can do as a coach, and I think a lot of coaches maybe miss this, is when somebody is going through a difficult time, the first thing you do is validate how they feel. Um, because we all want to be seen, like we all want to be heard. And if somebody's not seeing you and just providing you with a solution, like I don't know, there's I don't know if that totally answers your question, but I think the yeah, the power of self-awareness and perhaps repairing your own relationship with yourself, because everything else seems to flow from that.
Yes. Yeah, and it'll flow much better.
Mm, yeah.
Certainly not in a straight line, but it'll flow better.
It's be a meandering journey, but we'll get
Yes,
there.
yeah. And I guess the last thing is thank you for that. Double pronged, I suppose. What are you working on? Kind of things you're working on professionally now. What are you
uh, sorry,
focusing on?
sorry, say again, Simon.
What are you focusing on professionally now, in terms of what's the next thing you're working on?
Yeah, so next thing I'm working on is me getting a little bit more comfortable being uncomfortable. So like spent the last couple of months basically getting a bit of a vision or like a plan in place, and like really spending time thinking about who I am, what do I believe in, how do I want to do this. And I feel in a pretty kind of good space with that, whilst also being open-minded to the fact that it might change. But the bit I'm not comfortable with, as I was kind of mentioning earlier on, is the like pivot to the businessman side of it. Like
Yeah,
I feel comfortable with my coach's hat on. I don't feel comfortable with my businessman's hat on, and it's always been a real stumbling block. So it's reaching out to people who can help,
yeah,
learning from other people. So I've just started that process, and my plan at the moment is being like, right, for a whole host of reasons, I've always been quite reticent about putting myself out there, social media, things like that. Like there's the whole kind of host of reasons why that makes me a wee bit uncomfortable, but also going, right, you know what, Donnie, it's just the way of the world. You either adapt or you die. So it's been a bit like, right, like let's like who's stopping you from doing this? And it's me and my kind of not wanting to be uncomfortable around that, but it's making the decision to go, right, get the help you need, and then just fucking do it, and let's see what happens.
well, that's nice way to finish it off, because all I need now from you is how people can get in touch with you. And we'll stick this all in. This will all be made
Yeah,
available, but
yeah. So I am just about to kind of get myself. Well, I don't know. You can define what I'm doing at the moment on LinkedIn as being active, like I'm there, but it's been like, right, I'm going to sort my profile out, and then just going to start reaching out to people. Is the kind of initial plan. So I'm on LinkedIn, Donnie Macfadyen. My coaching company is called Second Mountain Coaching. Um,
okay.
Kind of touches a little bit what we were saying earlier on about you reach a point in your life where you've been through the kind of the battles and the difficult times, so you reach a point where you want to help people.
Yes,
And it's much more about I can be happy now, as opposed to spending your whole life thinking I'll be happy when I have X, Y, Z.
yeah,
Is the kind of the philosophy behind the name. So yeah, currently LinkedIn would be the way would be the way to contact me.
okay. Well, we shall get that in the
Yeah,
notes
thank
for
you.
this, and make that blatantly obvious for people to find you.
Fantastic. This was amazing.
And yeah, listen, thank you again, Donnie, for agreeing to do this. Really appreciate it. Uh, so Christ, there's so much in this conversation for people to take away. Uh, so yeah, life experience, a lot of wisdom
Thank you.
to
Yeah,
share.
no, I really enjoyed it. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to yeah to talk a little bit about my life and the things that I've kind of learned and the stuff that I want to do. So no, thank you. It's a real honor.
Well, another way to help people, isn't it? So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, give people a platform.
yeah, yes,
Amazing.
absolutely. Top man. Thanks, mate.
Yes, Simon. Thank
Cheers.
you.